I'm Reverend Ryan Pulley, and we are Soul Evolution Collaborative. And this is Stripped Down Sunday, where we unchurch your Sunday experience. So, welcome. We are thrilled to have this time with you to offer some inspiration, some spiritual upliftment, and hopefully a new take on life in a unique Soul Evolution Collaborative kind of way. So, we've stripped down Sunday mornings to offer you a streamlined experience that fits your needs. So we had this strong desire to bring an updated message of inspiration to a world at a time where I think we need it the most. And so Soul Evolution Collaborative is dedicated to personal transformation and communal evolution. So 2 quick things before we get started. Everything that you want to know about this community, Soul Evolution Collaborative, what we believe, how you can get involved, can be found on our website, soulevolutioncollaborative.org. So the link I've also put in the chat, so feel free to hop on over there, poke around, and see what trouble you can get into in some of the events that we have there and some ways that you can get involved in this ministry. Also, it's communities with missions like ours that really desire to bring a change, a lasting change to our world, not only in a personal way, but also in this global experience. And so we're really actively in this idea of creating a new earth and ways of life that can benefit everyone. So if you are in any way able to continue this mission, we gratefully welcome your support, and donations can also be made at our website, soulevolutioncollaborative.org. You can just hit the donate button, and that link, like I said before, is in the chat. All right, so here we go. So we are this month following the global themes of Centers for Spiritual Living. And so the topic for today is called The Joy of Becoming. So I really want to start this conversation off from this idea of becoming from a philosophical perspective. That's kind of my background, religion and philosophy. So sometimes I kind of dive there first and see what it has to say. And so this is a little bit of that. And so when we talk about from a philosophical perspective, this idea of becoming, it usually is discussed in relation to being. So being versus becoming. And so in philosophy, there's a really unique distinction between those 2 ideas, but they actually support each other. And for our conversation today, we're going to find that they really kind of paradoxically are the same thing, especially from a science of mind perspective. So the state of being can be defined philosophically. It reflects how a person's nature or behavior is at present moment. So according to Plato, one of the great philosophers, the world of being is the world of forms and ideas. So this is this world of the absolute, the independent, and the transcendent. So conversely, Plato described this idea of becoming, which is the topic for today, as existing in the world of the physical, the things that we experience through our senses. So becoming then, according to Plato, becomes this transition towards the embodiment and awareness of whatever desired change or whatever thing that we're looking to get or looking to become, that state of being that we're headed towards. And so this is a process of coming to be something or passing into another state. So we got it. We got being is kind of this absolute independent transcendent idea, and becoming is kind of like moving towards that state. And it's this kind of movement towards transformation. And we're always about talking about transformation here at SEC. That's kind of the whole point, this understanding of what that means and how we can apply these principles to our lives that actually create movement in our awareness and movement in our evolution and movement of how that outpictures in the world. But I would assert, when we're talking about, especially about Plato and this idea of being and becoming, that this transformation is not becoming something different, but instead it is a movement not towards something, but actually back to this awareness that we are already that this becoming is this awareness that we are already the being. Now, I know that sounds complicated, and hopefully we'll shake it out as we go along, and that'll really kind of take hold in your mind. This being, which serves as our connection to the universe, the spirit, divine, nature, Earl, whatever you want to call that divine presence, that thing itself. And so this becoming is a movement back to an awareness that we are already at, that. Becoming exists within the realm of this limitless possibilities and our willingness to step beyond our own understanding of being in this present moment. So let's simplify this kind of really complex philosophical idea that Plato laid out for us many years ago, kind of from a science of mind perspective. So for me, this idea of becoming is really, in my mind, this activity of remembering. So this becoming is not doing something to get something or get a destination, but instead it's kind of this rewinding back on ourselves and to remembering. The remembering of our being, that essence, that changeless blueprint, that is the framework of who we are. So we're not plugging in a formula to become something, but instead we're kind of peeling back the layers, and we've talked about this a lot. Peeling back the layers, clearing the fog off of our mask, whatever you want to call it, and this understanding, this remembering. So in becoming, we're actually remembering and coming back to this state of being. So this process of remembering or becoming, is it always joyful? Not at all. And so this interesting, the title, The Joy of Becoming, for me, joy is not, I think there is joy in the remembrance. I think there is joy in this idea of becoming or idea of coming back to this understanding of being. But I don't know that it's joy in the sense that we might see out and about and what we may understand joy to be. So for me, joy is less about this emotion of happy and yay, yay, yay sort of feeling. But for me, joy is more of a resting, of a knowing. It is that kind of place that you can kind of come home to. Kind of like when you've had a busy day at work or shopping or whatever you're doing that's kind of created some sort of chaos in your life out in the external world, and you come home and you plop down on that comfy couch, that place where you can take a breath. And it's interesting, when you take a breath, you do kind of feel this kind of expansion, this kind of relaxation, this kind of settling in, this kind of knowing. And so that, to me, is what this idea of joy is, joy in the becoming. So it's joy in the returning back to. It's joy in the remembrance of our being. And sometimes this is not always easy. Sometimes it's not always fun, this remembering, because sometimes it takes some work, because there's so many things that are in our experience as human beings that layer on this remembering and cloud our vision or weigh us down. And sometimes it's so hard to remember because our brains are so full of everything else that points to the opposite of the truth of who we are. So in this remembering, it's kind of wiping away those things. It's choosing to have a singular focus on this framework, this truth, this essence, this connection with the divine. And that doesn't mean it's always going to be easy. That doesn't mean it's always going to be happy. That doesn't mean there are not going to be challenges. But it is the joy of the remembering. It's the relaxing of the remembering. It is the breathing into the remembering. And so becoming is less about getting something and more about remembering something. And it is the remembering. It is in that coming back to that our true power, our true nature, our true ability to create is unleashed. So when I think about remembering, there's kind of three key things that I think about when I'm trying to step from this space of complete unawareness of the truth of who I am. And sometimes I live from that space. And those are times where I'm not grounded or unbalanced, or I make really weird decisions. I mean, you know what it feels like. It looks different for all of us. But sometimes we forget the truth of who we are. So when we are on this path, this spiritual path, this path of life, because there's really no difference in the spiritual life and life, but on this path of life, on this path of choosing to remember, I think there are three key things that I think about. One is willingness. And sometimes for me, it's the willingness to be willing, because sometimes I'm really stubborn in my own way of being, and this is the truth. And I'm going to live from this space, no matter how much pain or how much challenge or how much white knuckling holding that brings to my awareness. So it's just a willingness. And sometimes that's just an unclenching, that's a relaxing, that's just a stopping and breathing and being willing to look at this idea of becoming, coming back to the truth of who we are. And I think it also takes, number two, it takes vulnerability. I think it takes not only a willingness, but a bravery and a vulnerability to look at those spaces, maybe look at those areas where we have forgotten. Look at those areas where we have created stories or underlying beliefs or scenarios that we're living from. Brene Brown talks about the stories we create, these stories in our mind that we create about scenarios and situations and people, and then we live from those stories and we hit the ground running. And so this idea of vulnerability in the context of being and remembering is to be willing to look at some of those areas where we have sunk into a default way of being, a default way of reacting, and really take a look at that and really hold that up to the light of the truth, hold that up to the things that we know to be true about the universe and our connection to it, that we are not separate from it. And a lot of times we make these decisions, or for myself, I make these decisions or live from these default ways of being because I forget my connection. And so each day is an opportunity to be like, I remember. Or, that's me acting on a default. I remember. And so this idea of becoming is this idea, this looping back, this remembering. And I think third, it takes authenticity. It takes authenticity to continue each day to engage in this remembrance and live from that space. And sometimes it's hard to live from that space. It's hard to live from that space of remembering when everything on the external experience may be shouting the antithesis of what that truth is. And so that takes an authenticity, that takes a willingness, that takes a vulnerability to stand in our truth, to live from that space, regardless of how others may be living in our experience, regardless of how societal influences may be pushing up against that. But to stand in their truth, to know it and to stand in it, to live from it, to speak from it, to interact from it, to relate to others from this space. And when we begin to do that, it's kind of a habit. We've developed these default ways of being, and sometimes they're good and sometimes maybe not so good. But we begin in this remembrance to build these habits, build these muscles, these ways of being, these ways of interacting, the ways of becoming, to speak to the truth of who we are. So here's the paradox. We are already being and becoming. That is the eternal paradox. We are the thing and the remembering of the thing. That all that we seek, we already are. We already have that within us. So we are that and the remembrance of that. The very source of love, of joy, of peace, of beauty, of truth, abundance, and all the things in between are already present. And so in this becoming, it's not actually gaining some new knowledge, but instead it's wiping away the dust and grime that has clouded our vision. And it's really taken the antidote for our own spiritual amnesia. That's the whole point of spiritual practice and community, universal principles, this community, SEC, even science of mind, the philosophy itself, it is that remembering. And that is our true becoming. And so I am a super big fan of Howard Thurman. I know we've got a lot of big Howard Thurman fans out there. He was a minister and a philosopher and a theologian and just an amazing presence on the planet. And so he had a writing, a poem, if you will, that really spoke to this idea of remembering, spoke to this idea, this kind of constant balance of being and becoming, and the truth that we are that. And so I wanted to end with that, to share this reading. And it's called, one of my favorites, it's called The Moments of My High Resolve. And he says, "Keep fresh before me the moments of my high resolve. Despite the dullness and the barrenness of the days that pass, if I search with due diligence, I can always find a deposit left by some former radiance. But I had forgotten. At the time, it was fully orbed, glorious, and resplendent. I was sure that I would never forget. In this moment of its fullness, I was sure that it would illumine my path for all the rest of my journey. I had forgotten how easy it is to forget. There was no intent to betray what seemed to be so sure at the time. My response was whole, clean, authentic. But little by little, there crept into my life the dust and grit of the journey. Details, lower level demands, all kinds of cross currents. Nothing momentous, nothing overwhelming, nothing flagrant, just wear and tear. If there had been some direct challenge, a clear-cut issue, I would have fought it to the end and beyond. In the quietness of the space, surrounded by the all-pervading presence of God, my heart whispers, keep fresh before me the moments of my high resolve, that in fair weather or in foul, in good times or in tempest, in the days when the darkness and the foe are nameless or familiar, I may not forget that to which my life is committed. Keep fresh before me the moments of my high resolve.